Unless you are clear on what's most important to you, you can't align everything around it. It's really simple to lead a simple life. It's not always easy, but it's always simple when you understand what your core values are for your company and for your personal life.
Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. And I always say we have a special guest, but I have never, ever said we have a guest that has been endorsed, her books by the Vatican, by the way, her international best-selling book, that has ever been a regular at the White House. When she shows up, they ask by her credentials, so they say, welcome back. Imagine that guest. And more importantly, what I love, and we see this, not quite a rags to riches story, but a riches to rags to value story, an incredible story of an incredible person, Dr. Betty Uribe, also known as Dr. Betty. Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, and welcome to the Massimo Show. The objective of the Massimo Show is to share how you can maximize your personal, professional margin. That's right. Let's make more money in less time. Let's turn chaos into clarity, confusion into confidence, and income into real wealth. Along with sharing my insight on how I grew a multi-million-dollar professional business, we're going to bring you the expert advice from a variety of authors, consultants, and thought leaders who will provide the tools you need to maximize your own personal and professional margin. Welcome to the Massimo Show. Dr. Betty, welcome to the Massimo Show.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to be part of your journey.
Dr. Betty, I can't thank you enough for your valuable time, a world leader. And you are a world leader. It's an honor to have you on the show, given what you've accomplished. So we'll go right into it. I know your story. I know where you started in the transformation to the United States. Let's stick with that story. If you can, please share with our audience your story, where you're born, where you're raised, and how you got to the United States. Let's go just there to where you get to where you're 12, 13 years old. Tell us about that if you can, please.
Sure. My upbringing was in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia, in South America. At the age of 12, I realized, actually, my mother realized that she had enough. I was born with a silver spoon. My father was a millionaire. He had a transportation. And one day, my mother's the four of us. My brother was 18. My other brother was 14. I was 12. And my little brother was 6. And she said, I'm leaving. You have a choice. You can leave with me. I'm leaving the country. You can leave with me. And we don't know what's going to happen, but you can stay here and your father will take care of you. A few days prior to that, my dad and I had watched this, where I'd come home drunk. And he almost killed my mother. It was that kind of a life. And she decided, okay, I don't care what I have here. I'm leaving. And it was the very first value-based decision I made in my life, I think, was coming to the United States with my mother, my 3 brothers. So that's how I got here. We had everything we ever needed. I was kind of conceited as a little girl, and I got to eat humble pie when I got here. So coming here at the age of 12, I was 12 years old, was an interesting journey, coming to a new country, new culture, new language, with really what we had in our luggage and a brand new life.
Incredible story. So as a child, you were well off. You had, as I've read and watched, you had maids. You certainly lived, for lack of a better term, in Colombia, a life of luxury in those terms. Came to the United States, very humble, clothes, food, mostly through the church early on. But you would consider yourself, and what I've read and heard, is more of a serial entrepreneur. So was that from your father's side? And had you applied this drive to really starting young in your own creating business opportunities?
Being a serial entrepreneur has been kind of in my blood. I think it came from my dad. My father had several businesses, and so I learned from him. I remember going to events with them. I remember going to visit the clients and visit the employees. During the holidays, it would take us over a month just to visit all the employees and their families and to bring presents for their kids and so forth. So I think I learned that part of it, the work ethic, the entrepreneurship, all of that from my dad. That's where I got it from. And it was interesting because from my dad, I had kind of a love-hate relationship with him growing up because of the alcoholism. And then yet I was the daddy's little girl. And so he took me everywhere. And little did I know, I remember being little and I had no idea he was teaching me how to be an entrepreneur. I just thought he just needed some company.
My father too, I talk about it in my new book, when he brought me in when I was, I think, 13, 14, and said, hey, I'm quitting my bank job, of all things, Betty, Dr. Betty, I'm quitting my bank job to go off on my own. And then I followed him around and did summer jobs with him. And I learned that was natural to become an entrepreneur. Now, but one thing you just said, and yes, your father's an alcoholic. Yes, your father's an abuser. No doubt, very negative values on that end. But it sounds like what you told me is, look, he's going around and sharing and providing and giving gifts to his employees. There had to be some values as well that you were learning along the journey.
Absolutely. He was a very giving man. He took care of his 90-year-old aunt. We would go on weekends and take care of her. He took care of the family. He was the oldest of 12, and he's the one that started this business. And he became the father figure for his family when his father got killed. And so if you think about work ethic and caring for your family, so again, the alcoholism was something that he did leave eventually, and he became just a loving father, and that's it. But he was always loving. He was always a good provider, good dad, but he did come home and beat up my mom. So I learned that to stay away from that part of life, right? But yeah, definitely the entrepreneurship was a big deal for us.
Tell us about your first entrepreneurial venture and how did that work out?
The first entrepreneur venture, I had a partner and we started an engineering and manufacturing company. We manufactured surgical lighting components. And in fact, Kaiser Permanente's gynecological light at the time, they don't have this light anymore, but at the time, their light was my light. I remember going to see my gynecologist at Kaiser many years ago and looking at the light and thinking, oh my gosh, that's my light. It was so neat. But that was our first venture. Started the business at home, kind of your typical type of manufacturing company that starts in your garage. So I had people that would come in and work by the piece, and we would manufacture the pieces of the light. And we had a company that we sold the light to, and that's how that business was.
What gave you the vision to say, you know what, I have an idea, because now you're working full time. It was a secretarial position, I believe. Is this when you start this idea of a business in your garage?
Yes. I was a secretary for an engineering department. We got the idea because I went to a course that taught us free enterprise, and it was a free enterprise course. And how do you hire people? How do you pay them by the piece instead of pay them by the hour? How do you maximize your productivity with your people? And we thought, wait a minute, I've got a garage. We could do this. We could create the machines and we could do this. And off this company started. So yeah, that was my first stint. And then of course it was followed by many others.
Incredible for the listeners out there. So many valuable lessons of the drive and taking the risk and why not, all going on in Betty's story, beyond also crafting a path based on values. So Dr. Betty, when did this, it's not a pursuit, I guess. What you tell me, what's the right word as far as the genesis of the value-based system? Help me out there.
When I was going to study to get my doctorate is when I got really clear, I think, on what I naturally do. So by the time I got to my doctorate, I had performed many turnarounds in the financial services industry, and being focused on entrepreneurs, I would walk into a business and I would do an assessment of the business. And very natural, I just have this natural instinct. So I can walk into a business and I can tell you what you need to do to double your income, triple your income, quadruple your income. In a first visit, I can just see things. But the turnarounds that I had done and the advice that I had given customers, they have always been values-based. So around the turn of the economy, when the economy started going down, I realized, wait a minute, there is an epidemic right now of people falling in all kinds of industries, in academia, in sports, in clergy, in business. If you remember, if you go back through your memory banks to that time, you remember all of these people falling. And the common thread was they said that some things were important to them, and then they acted not according to them. So they were incongruent in the way they said their values were, in the way they acted. And everything that I did in my turnarounds was based on values. I hire based on values. I take a look at a company and I look at the culture and I see, okay, what are their core values? Are they living according to their core values? Do they even know what their core values are? So that's where the genesis started. It was kind of marrying the two, understanding that this world needs role models, and my kids and my children's children would need to have some role models, and all of the role models were falling. They just kept falling. Every time you turned on the TV or you turned on the news, that's all you heard about was people falling. So that was the genesis. So my dissertation it was more of a venture to look for role models that would do similar to what I was doing, was leading with values, leading with a higher purpose, which is something I found, and permeating those values through their organization. But they had to be high performing folks. They had to bring sustainable performance to the table, because leading with values is one thing, but creating bottom line results and sustainable bottom line unprecedented results, that's a whole nother thing. So if I could marry the two, then I could put out some pretty good role models for people to follow, and for kids to say, wow, I want to follow this person. And wow, I can create results in my personal life and in my business life if I follow my values. And that's how the whole thing started. It became a book. When I presented my final oral defense, they said, you have to make it into a book, and they gave me honors on it. So, yeah.
We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about Dr. Betty's first executive position, where she's, in fact, the first female executive at the California Bank and Trust. We'll talk about that as well. Talk about also these actual values of leadership, as well as what's next for this incredible person known as Dr. Betty, when we come back to the Massimo Show. So stay tuned and hold on. Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, president and founder of the Massimo Group. And did you know that for over the past 11 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners just like you in repositioning their and/or their team's efforts so they can build the personal, professional practice they've always dreamed of. We provide coaching programs for all levels of experience, earnings, and yes, success. So if you're finally ready to get off that transaction treadmill and chasing deals that are growing nowhere and start building the personal, professional business and life consisting of greater wealth and more time, check us out at Massimo.coach. That's Massimo.coach. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo, and welcome back to our special session with Dr. Betty. And yes, as you're seeing more and more of Dr. Betty, by the way, she's one of the 50 most influential Latinas in the United States. Do I have that right, Dr. Betty?
50 most powerful. That's what they call it. But, power, influence. I don't quite like the word power, but that's what they call it.
I have to tell you, this holiday, I spend it with my mom, who's Puerto Rican. Her sisters will be there. They're all from Puerto Rico. So I'm going to tell them all, hey, I spent some time with Dr. Betty and see just to impress them. So thank you for that gift. Let's talk about the gift. Let's talk about the gift that is Dr. Betty. It's a rather incredible journey, and what she's giving back and what she's doing for other folks in both the community and worldwide. But let's talk about California Bank and Trust. And you were, in fact, the first female executive vice president at the bank. And you did some pretty incredible things that got recognized on a national basis at that bank. Can you tell us about what you did there and how you had such an impact from a turnaround perspective?
Absolutely. When I came to California Bank and Trust, the idea was to perform a pretty comprehensive turnaround of the business and personal banking division. And at the time, they had bought several banks and they hadn't merged them yet. And in fact, one of the banks still had the name after several years of having purchased it. So going into that particular community and convincing the community that California Bank and Trust was the name for it and convincing the employees and so forth. I think when you begin a turnaround, you've got to be able to build trust very quickly with your people. Teddy Roosevelt said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you've got to be able to just get in the water with your people and get out in the field with them. So for the first 90 days, I told the CEO for whom I reported, I said, David, make believe I'm not here for the first 90 days. And so in order to maximize my time, I used a driver so that he could just take me from one place to the other. And I visited with over 550 people. I got on a plane and I got in the car and visited with them. And I asked 4 questions. What's working? What's not working? If you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? And what do you do on weekends for fun? 4 questions, very simple. And then I took my PDA and I would open up a blank page and I would tell them, I'm not texting, I'm just taking notes on what you're telling me. And so I learned from the ground up exactly what was wrong with the company. And then also I found low-hanging fruit, ways to, like, opportunities to make an impact, almost like the random acts of kindness, if you will. So for example, I would walk into a branch and I would walk into the lunchroom as their private space. And if I saw that there was a couch that was just really dirty or not utilized very much, I would call the facilities people and I would say, hey, the couch is not operative and people can't sit here and rest, or the refrigerator's not working. Can we get a refrigerator here? And they would say, it'll take a couple of weeks. And I would say, oh, that's okay. I'll use my credit card. I'll buy it. And then you guys can pay for it later. No, we can do it. We can do it. So very quickly, I got a reputation internally. Oh my gosh, she's going to that branch. Let's make sure things are working. Air conditioner wasn't working in one office and the employee was sitting outside. And I'm like, why are you not in your office? It's freezing in there. So I would walk in and I would call it. I would say, can we get somebody this afternoon? Or I can call 411 and get somebody to come and fix it this afternoon. Can we get this done right away? And so immediately the word started spreading. Wow, she really cares. So that was part of it. And then we created many working groups that tackled over 40 projects very quickly in the first 6 months. So that's internally. From an external perspective, I teamed up with Steve Borg, who was my marketing person at the time, an incredible man, incredible leader. And I said, let's do something for the underserved. And so we created a $500 million fund with my CEO, David Blackford, at the time. And we announced that we would be lending to minority and women-owned businesses. And we created what we called TEAM. It stands for Tools, Education, Access to Capital, and Mentoring. We teamed up with 11 nonprofits in California. Each of the nonprofits had a core competency in one of those areas: tools, education, access to capital, and mentoring, whether it was a startup business or whatever. And then we funded these. And so very quickly in the first 6 months, the community figured out, who the heck is this California Bank and Trust? We didn't know who you guys were. And so we had a 360 approach to the turnaround. We had to look internally. We had to gain the trust of our people. And then we had to create accountability, which was lacking in the team, but it had to be coming from within, not from the outside. So really understanding people from inside out. What's important to you? What do you do on weekends? Tells me what's most important to them.
Let me stop you right there, because you have a lot of leaders have, and it is what it is. You have the subconscious competence. You say things that are so powerful, yet you continue to skim right by them. I'm going to take it back to a couple of things I want you to just to reiterate, or maybe expand upon a little bit. Number one,
Sure.
You shared these 4 questions you asked all the staff employees at the bank to get to know them. I got 3 of them. What's working? What's not? What do you do for fun? What was that 4th question?
It's what's working, what's not working, If you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? The reason I ask that question is when the economy went down, and it's all in my book, when the economy went down, many studies showed that the employees knew the answer all along. Employees always know the answer to what's wrong with a company. It's the leaders that don't get out in the field to find out. If you had a magic wand, what would you do differently? It's such a simple question, but they'll tell us the answer. And then the fourth one is, what would you do for fun?
Awesome. And let's talk something about this, because this is a big element for entrepreneurs building their teams, either with employees or outsource or independent contractors, this idea of accountability. And you said it has to come from within. So can you expand on that theme a little bit, and what exactly did you do to create this environment and culture of accountability?
Absolutely. I'll start with telling you that every time that people do a 360, and a 360 is a test that tests people all around you, and I get a perfect score on accountability each time. And people like it. People don't shy away from it. Let me tell you why. It's really important to find out the why of people. And I just spoke, every time I speak, I talk about this. Why do you do what you do? What is it that cost you to start this business? What is it that cost you to be the administrative assistant, or the cleaning people, or the manufacturing leader, or the whatever your job is? There's always a why. And the why is usually outside of that job. Most people have a hard time finding their passion in their job because they don't realize their why. And so by asking that last question, what do you do on weekends? Some people would say, I go visit my 90-year-old mother that I have in a home. Some people would say, I talk to my children that are in college and they're going through Harvard, or they're going through Cal State Fullerton, or whatever. They're the first child in the whole family to go to college. And that simple question gets you to their why. Once you find out their why, then you understand how you can help them continue to go there or get there in an exponential way. So if somebody's why is they want to send their kids through college, then, well, let's see how we can help you save more money. Let's see, how much money are you making right now? How can we maximize what you're making? And so that, and really staying true to what their core values are, not yours, but theirs. What's important to them? And so the accountability, then they put their own goals in place for themselves. And normally, in studies show, when you ask people to put goals together, if they come up with, those goals are going to be higher than the ones that you put on them. You can give them a goal, a yearly goal. You need to bring in so much business. If they put their own goal, and if their goal is attached to their own personal goals, then those goals are going to be higher anyway. So we don't have to work as hard. A lot of people work too hard. They don't work smart. You've got to be centered on your people.
I couldn't agree with you more. As a coaching organization, we always ask our clients what their goals are. And of course, they always fall back on the default of, I want to make X, which we never accept. Why do you want to make these goals? What's the driving behind that? So what? Why does it matter? And to the audience out there, when you're setting your goals and you're crafting the reasons, whatever you're doing to drive forward, you got to understand the why. And certainly Simon Sinek has a beautiful approach to why. A lot of folks have, but just understand the why. Dig deep on the why. I couldn't agree more. So Dr. Betty, we've now gotten to a point where you're turning around this bank as an executive. You're the first female executive, but you become more of a turnaround expert. That seems to be one of the many fortes you have. That just happens to be one of them. You said yourself, you have this innate ability to look at a company and say, we need to do this or that to double or triple income. So people right now listening saying, what can I do to double or triple or get better and more productive? Can you just share with the audience maybe 2 or 3 things you see? Everyone's different, I get that. But 2 or 3 things you see in the industries that you see and you worked with that are things people should consider, look deeper at, as what they may do to in fact become more productive, more efficient, or yes, make more money. What are some of the similar themes you see and what's holding companies back?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much for asking. And I've seen companies that are in the medical industry, in the manufacturing industry, in the IT industry, all kinds of industries. And in my own trajectory, turning companies around. And by the way, you did say it is innate. I've been doing this since I was 19 years old. My first company, I was a little over 19 when I started it. What I find is two things. The goals are not clear. And most of the time when I ask the CEO, what are your goals for your company? And then I go and ask the leader for manufacturing, or the leader for HR, or the marketing person, the goals are not clear. They're not aligned. They're not simple. They have to be simple. They have to be measurable. They have to be to where everybody in the company knows not only the major goal, but how their department affects that goal, whether it is tangible or intangible. For example, we often say that HR handles the soft skills. I don't believe that. I think HR handles the tough skills. And so how is it that HR can affect the bottom line results? Oh my goodness, the employee experience, the turnaround, how often people leave the company or come, how they rave about us, our company or the company out in the marketplace and create raving fans out in the marketplace. The same as an engineer. How does an engineer affect the bottom line results of the company? And so does the engineer know the goals of the company? Or are their goals that they're measuring only how many new products they can bring out? So everybody should know. So I normally, for that, I just create a campaign, and it's very simple. Know your numbers. And I spot check. I go out and I spot check, and I ask the cleaning people, what are the numbers? What are the goals for the company? I ask the HR person, the salesperson, the audit person, the accounting person, everybody, and they should all align. So that's the first thing. One of the underlying things that is an epidemic in every company is trust. Stephen Covey speaks a lot about it, and he talks about the speed of trust. And I find that so often in companies where the communication is not really clear. And if you go to neuroscience for a moment, our brain was built to put connections together. And as soon as we find a connection, dopamine comes into the brain, which is a chemical reaction, a very positive chemical reaction that happens in the brain. So if we don't tell our people very simply what's going on in our minds, they're going to create patterns in their mind and they're going to make it up. This is how we're normally wired. People just make it up. And what I'm telling you happens in personal relationships as well as in business. And so if they're making up things that you're thinking, but they're making up their own stories about what the boss said or what the CEO said, it's a very ineffective way for people to spend their time. When people have trust, people don't have to waste time in the rumor mill. They don't have to waste time at the water fountain wondering, did you see how he said this? I wonder what he was talking about. He never tells us what's going on. And you hear the rumors, a lot of time wasted. So building trust, you said to talk about two things. I would say those two things would clearly be on the top of the top 10. Trust in an organization and clear goals and clear vision.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to ask you one more question I want you to expand upon before we get to the final session. We're going to dive into these 10 keys to values and leaders. But before we get to the next break, I want you to look, you're now a regular at the White House and you get invited to attend certain meetings on Saturday mornings, and you've been to the Vatican. And in fact, the Vatican not only endorsed your book, they almost wrote a foreword on your book. It was incredible. So one simple thing that made this all possible that hold most people back. For example, in my new book, I actually got a call once from the assistant of Steve Forbes. And for the younger audience, if you don't know who Steve Forbes is, you need to Google him. But I was so shocked that his assistant called me that this week, as we're working on the new book, I actually called the assistant and requested Mr. Forbes take a look at the book. Now, what's the worst thing that could happen? Because I just asked. They can always say no, right? But you've also asked some pretty powerful people for some opportunities. and they've said yes. So just share with the audience briefly, if you can, the opportunity with the White House and the opportunity with the Vatican, please.
Yes. And before I do, very briefly, we had an opportunity to speak about your book offline, and I can't wait to get my hands on that book. It sounds like you've got some really good nuggets for people. But yeah, so the White House and the Vatican, then some, right? Where have I gotten? How have I done it? I've asked. It's very simple. My Aunt Ruby and my mother taught me when I came to this country, it doesn't matter who's in front of you. If it's a bigger title, they probably have bigger debt than you. And that's the only reason. So I don't look at titles. In fact, I just met the previous CEO of Swatch, the Swiss watches in Netherlands at my last trip a couple of weeks ago. In the back of his business card, he has his name, T-O-N, Ton, written out. And I thought, how neat is that? I don't believe in titles. I believe in people. And so when I meet somebody, whether it's the president of whatever country, I've been meeting with a lot of dignitaries, or the cleaning people, to me, they're people and there's something to learn from them. And if I ask General Mick, he was on his way. I wanted to break bread with him the next day after I interviewed him. And he said, I'm going to Bible study. And I said, can I come? Little did I know it was at this. It's actually an extension of the White House where even people from the White House don't know. And they have this Bible study. Generals from the White House and the Pentagon come. And the same thing with the Vatican. I asked for an endorsement when the Monsignor Giacomo Papalardo was sharing with me that he had brought his book and he was getting endorsements. And I just said, something told me, you know how you have your little voice that says ask, and then the other little voice that's panicking. No, it's too much. They're too big. They're going to say no. Shoot. What's the worst that can happen? They say no, and at least now they know that you want an endorsement, and maybe no is not now. Maybe no is later. So ask anyway, and you're not going to miss anything. You're going to be ahead just by asking. So that's the way I've gotten everywhere. It's just asking, but asking with innocent curiosity.
But you also ask for a specific, which I love, specific time frame. Talk about that.
Yes. Stephen Covey, when I met him, he was speaking at an event and I had just finished my manuscript. I had the final manuscript to review of my book. And I walked in. I always walk in an hour early, by the way. Always walk in an hour early because you get the whoever's speaking all to yourself. And I did that and Stephen was there. So I said, oh my gosh, what about my book? Could you endorse my book? And making this short because I don't have time for the whole story. I said, would you mind reading my book? I got an endorsement from the Vatican, and he actually literally read the entire endorsement, and he looked at me and I said, can I have an endorsement from you? He said, oh my gosh, if you're good enough for the Vatican, I guess you're good enough for me. And I said, can I ask you one more thing? It was Friday. I said, I needed Sunday at 5:00. I have my manuscript. I can give it to you. Surely you're going to be taking an airplane ride. Can you just read it on your airplane ride home? And he just looked at me like, I can't believe you're asking me this. And he said, you will have your endorsement by 5:00 on Sunday. And not only did he send me an endorsement, in his letter, it's a frameable letter, he said, I am your biggest fan, or something like that in the letter. So, and here's Stephen Covey Jr., who wrote The Speed of Trust. I mean, the man is busy, but you know what? If you want something done, you ask the busiest person. He got it done. By 5:00, I had my endorsement.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Dr. Betty, can you stay with us for a few more minutes?
Yes, of course.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to dive into these top 10 values of world leaders. She's going to share that with us, so please stay tuned. If you want to lead, you have to understand these values, where they are, and Dr. Betty is going to share those with us. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the Massimo Show. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo, and we always tell our coaching clients that knowing isn't doing. That's right. Don't kid yourself. In fact, in my new book, Don't Kid Yourself, Knowing Isn't Doing, Build the Business and Life You Desire, I lay out many of our Massimo methods that we share with our clients to help them transform their lives. My new book, Knowing Isn't Doing, is going through a soft launch that will happen in March of 2020, and then a big national launch in September 2020. For more information, check out knowingisn'tdoing.com. Hey, this is Rod Santomassimo, and we are back with our final session, unfortunately, with the amazing Dr. Betty. And Dr. Betty is going to share with us these top 10 guiding principles, advice for you in your own journey. So Dr. Betty, this is going to be a quick hit. I'm going to share a value that you share with your audience, and I'll ask you to expand upon it just a little bit, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
These guiding principles. First, number one, lead with values. Help us there.
Unless you are clear on what's most important to you, you can't align everything around. It's really simple to lead a simple life. It's not always easy, but it's always simple. When you understand what your core values are for your company and for your personal life. That's what I'm talking about in that chapter.
Love it. Number two, protect your brand.
If you were to take a look at what's going to be on your epitaph, what are people going to say when you die? What is it that you want to be known for? That is your brand. When you lead according to your core values, your brand stays intact. And so protecting your brand is living according to your values. What are people going to say? And the most important part of that one is perception, right? If you're going to do something that's going to look like you're not leading according to your values, then people are going to make up in their heads whatever it is about you. So protect that brand. Always protect the brand.
You know, that's such an important point before we move forward. And your key word there was perception. So your brand, would you say, is how others perceive you? Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. If you think of big brands, how do they build trust? How do you build trust? By being consistent, right? Consistently with your values and what people are thinking about you, that is your brand. Yes.
Okay, number three, find your voice.
I've been in so many places where people try to be like me or people try to be like somebody else. It's really important to be authentically you. And maybe you can borrow ideas from somebody, but don't try to be somebody else because then you're trying to show up as someone else. You're not being authentic. So just show up. You're good enough. Just show up. But show up as you, not as somebody else.
Yeah, and I know this is a theme in what I've watched in your videos and everything, this idea of just be yourself, and you are good enough, regardless of what your restrictions you may have on yourself, you are good enough for whatever you're seeking. I love that. Dr. Betty, how about number three, seek out champions? And are these the same thing as mentors?
No, they're different. Champions stake their reputation on the line for you. The mentors will help you along the way. For example, if I were to say, go to Rod, he's the person that's going to help you grow your business. He's the best coach that's going to really dig into you and really bring out the best in you and help you do your turnaround. Rod is the very best person. I would be willing to stake my reputation on the line for Rod. That is a champion.
Perfect. And thank you. Perfect. I now understand. Okay. Number four, inspire other leaders to be the best visions of themselves.
What's the best way to inspire others? The best way to inspire others is by being yourself and being the person that they would want to be. So how do we do that? We lead according back to values. We lead according to our values. We show up as ourselves. We take interest in people. We take the time to listen, and we act according to our values, and we hold ourselves accountable. So inspire others to be their very best, and don't let them get away with not being themselves. Tell them the truth. If they're not being their very best, let them know, hey, is this the best you can have? That is the best question you can ask an employee. Is this the best you can give me?
I love it. Okay, next, leave a legacy.
We're all given a certain amount of years, a certain amount of time, finite time on this earth. What is your legacy going to be? That causes you to lead with a much higher value than just what can I do today? What is your legacy? And if you think about your legacy for your children, for people that, I always say children are the messengers we send to a time we will never see. I borrowed that. The author is unknown, but it's a really neat thing to really think about is, what am I leaving behind? For me, it's scholarships all across the world, 100 scholarships in each continent by the time I'm 80 years old. That's going to be my legacy, because each kid is going to give another scholarship to somebody else. So how are you going to perpetuate your stay in this world?
Fantastic. This one I'm curious about. Don't ever forget where you came from, But also there's a second part of that, and that is step into the light. Help me understand that one.
Don't forget where you came from, because that keeps us humble, wherever it is that you came from. And a lot of people choose to forget if they came from poverty, if they came from struggles, they tend to want to forget and only show up the best. And stepping into the light, I learned that by interviewing Admiral Raquel Bono. Today, she is in charge of all healthcare facilities for all of the armed forces for the United States around the world. And she said when she got her award, when I met her in Washington, D.C., said, I'm stepping into the light. It's very uncomfortable for me to step into the light, but I realize that I'm at a position right now where I'm getting these awards, and I owe it to other women for me to step into the light so that I can help them be that light. Don't wait until you begin to get the awards to step into the light. Don't be so shy that you allow your shyness to stand in the way of you making a difference for others.
Love it. Trust your instincts.
Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink. And in that book, he talked about having blink moments or instinctive moments. When we have instincts, it takes a certain amount of time to become an expert in a topic. And if you've already done your job for at least 7 years, in essence, by his definition, you're an expert. And so your instincts, it's that little voice that tells you. Have you ever had that little voice that starts saying, hey, you got to make sure that you do this? And then you don't pay attention to it and you say, oh, I should have heard my little voice. That's your instincts. Trust your instincts. Listen to that little voice.
Okay. Number 9, one of my values is live a life of gratitude.
That was most present in my life when my brother was passing away of cancer. I was with him for his last 12 months and took care of him. And being in gratitude, I remember thinking, I know how I'm going to get past this. I'm going to live a life of gratitude. And so I was grateful for the little things. If he could move a finger when he couldn't talk or see, but I knew that he could hear me, and I would tell him a dirty joke in the ear, and he would just move a little finger, and I would know that he was cracking up inside. And I was just so grateful for that. And so I learned that in life, living a life of gratitude is living a life of abundance.
And finally, number 10, something that certainly you live by, is lead with a higher purpose.
A higher purpose is something that I found in my study. It's something bigger than you. My brother, before he passed away, said, have dreams and have a purpose that is so much bigger than you that you couldn't possibly do it alone. And that's when you know that God is in the middle of it and that others had to help you do it. Leading with a higher purpose gives you purpose, gives you a much bigger way of looking at why you are here on this earth. So leading with a higher purpose is also a common value that I found amongst all of the people that I studied for my dissertation.
Those are 10 incredible principles to follow amongst your journey. So valuable. And speaking of valuable, let's face it, Dr. Betty's time is incredibly valuable. In fact, she just got back from speaking at the United Nations, and next year she's speaking at the World Peace Conference alongside the Queen after the Queen speaks. So you can imagine how valuable Dr. Betty's time is. So I'm going to just ask for 2 more questions. Number 1, fantastic tenure, fantastic success with the California Bank and Trust. I believe you recently left that position. A, is that true? And B, what's next for Dr. Betty?
Yes, I recently left. I left October 1st, and it was such a bittersweet opportunity that my president and I have planned for the last couple of years, and it was just time. I'm actually signing up with an agency, and I'm going to be taking my speaking career to a whole nother level. I spoke 11 times in the first 6 months. And, there's only so much vacation you can take. In my company, Effectus Enterprises, DBA Dr. Betty Uribe, we're continuing to do turnarounds and continuing to seek opportunities to make an impact for business, but we're now doing it for ourselves. So from a business and more of a higher purpose and raising the funds for those 100 scholarships around the world, I feel like I can affect business across the world and affect leaders across the world, bringing values to leadership at the core level and at the highest levels as well.
Fantastic. Dr. Betty, thank you so much. But I know our audience is saying, I need more Dr. Betty. So how do folks get more Dr. Betty?
My website is drbettyuribe.com, and people can reach me on LinkedIn. I do read and respond to every LinkedIn message directly. So if people want to send me a message, it's Dr. Betty Uribe on LinkedIn and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. It's all Dr. Betty Uribe.
Dr. Betty, I thank you so much. We're honored to have you on the Massimo Show, and we will continue to follow your light and your guidance along our journey, and certainly focus on values moving forward. So thank you so much.
Rod, thank you so much. I really consider you a value-based leader, and I'm very particular about where I spend my time, and spending time with you and your audience. I know that this is going into fertile ground, and I know that you are absolutely someone to watch as well. So I just want to thank you for all the work that you do, for the good work you do for business owners around the country. You're doing fantastic work, and I will continue to follow you as well.
Well, thank you. And to our audience, thank you for your valuable time. And please, as you know what I always say, knowing isn't doing. Don't kid yourself. Take some of the lessons shared with Dr. Betty today, implement them right away, and watch your personal and professional margin grow. I want to thank you for listening to this version of the Massimo Show. And please go out and share this with your friends, your colleagues. Heck, share it with your dog. Just share it. And more importantly, just give me some feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. We all grow from understanding what our audience wants to hear. So until next time, this is Rod Santomassimo with the Massimo Show. Hi, this is Rod Santomassimo, president and founder of the Massimo Group. And did you know that for over the past 11 plus years, we've worked with thousands of independent contractors, solopreneurs, and small business owners just like you in repositioning their and/or their team's efforts so they can build the personal, professional practice they've always dreamed of. We provide coaching programs for all levels of experience, earnings, and yes, success. So if you're finally ready to get off that transaction treadmill and chasing deals that are growing nowhere and start building the personal, professional business and life consisting of greater wealth and more time, check us out at massimo.coach. That's MASSIMO.coach.